So I think from the personality, many pilots that I have seen is, they are very trustworthy people. They are very, they know their subject. They are very tech savvy. You have to be when you fly a modern plane. It's a modern computer that you fly, basically. And super reliable, very process oriented. So taking all of these traits into account that are ingrained in them.
Welcome back to another edition of COVID-19 from Crisis to Creation here on Mentory TV. I'm Patricia Falco Beccalli, your host. And before looking at what we're going to talk about today, let me say thank you. Thank you to all of you that have subscribed to the channel already, that are so proactively sharing your thoughts and your ideas with us, really co-creating this channel. So thank you for being with us here on the channel. Anyway, let's look at the airline sector. I mean, to be honest with you, it's been grounded. And I do not say excuse the pun, because grounded wouldn't really cut it. It's been decimated. If you look at the latest data coming from the International Air Transport Association, for example, global passenger departures in 2020 were down a stunning 60%. Also, the revenues on the passenger's kilometer are down by 66%. A lot of these pilots and cabin crew have lost their jobs or are in furlough. Actually, less than half of all the pilots out there are still flying on a day-to-day basis. So I'm asking myself, what are they doing right now? What are they going to do in future? And do they need to perhaps retrain and use some of their skills they already have as pilots in other sectors and industries? A lot of questions I would like to know and answered by Stephanie Schoss. She's a director at the St. Gallen University, and she's the founder and initiator of the pilot retraining program. Apart from that, Stephanie, you're a passionate pilot yourself, an entrepreneur, not only a wonderfully beautiful lady, but also a mother to a patchwork family of about 7 kids. So thanks so much for making the time to come onto the show.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm excited to be here. And I'm excited about our conversation. And let's see what we can do for the declining airline industry and all the pilots.
Yes, and I think this is so heart-driven, because I got the feeling that because you're a passionate pilot yourself, and it's not only private but also commercial, that you really had a sting in your heart looking at what the airline industry is suffering because of the COVID-19 crisis. Lay the land for us. What really hit you and what motivated you then to do something about it?
Yeah, look, I think you were quite spot on already, with, I have an unusual career with different, with the different parallel careers or portfolio careers, I think, as they call it. And I've been flying for the past 16 years and in the last years in the commercial world. And so I got to know many great personalities, great leaders who decide over life and death in a very short period of time. And I have a lot of admiration for them. So when the crisis came along, I was just hit by the fact that many of them are bored to death, that many of them go and, distribute newspapers in the evening or in the night because they don't have a job anymore, or because they, as you say, fly only 20% of their normal of their normal pensum. And I felt we need to do something about that. And now being also with one foot in the education sector and using the education as an enabler for career transition, I thought that's something worthwhile pursuing, and giving these people a new chance and hope and self-esteem and everything they need for a relaunch of their career.
Yeah, and I think we need to start with their career, what their career really is. At the end of the day, it's very hard potentially to retrain somebody that is that specialized as a pilot is. I mean, they know their plane inside out, they fly their plane, but beyond that border, that finger that takes you from the airport into the plane. I wonder about their skills.
Well, there is the aspect of skills and there is the aspect of personality. So I think from the personality, many pilots that I have seen is, they are very trustworthy people. They are very, they know their subject. They are very tech savvy. You have to be when you fly a modern plane. It's a modern computer that you fly, basically. And super reliable, very process oriented. So taking all of these traits into account that are ingrained in them, plus adding the education that they have and the daily routines that they go through, being, process-oriented people and on schedule, on time. So merging the skills and the personality gives a very distinct pattern. And then what adds on top is that I realized, because the career is so specific, they don't sometimes have the self-esteem to envision themselves in a different sector. And many of them told me, well, except from flying this type of aircraft, I don't know what I can do or should do. And that was, for an entrepreneur like me, that was totally new, that someone wouldn't know how to translate skill and personality into a different sector. Yeah. And that's why we took this as a starting point to really say, well, we understand who you are, we understand your profession, your professional skills, and we see how we can build on these skills and retrain you, give you the common understanding of the business world, the mini MBA, so to say, to understand the business world, but also help you to see where is the best person job fit for you based on personality and skills. And this is how we started developing the program.
Well, that is wonderful. And I think this kind of translation to see, okay, what are the real skills you have in your current job that are actually needed? I mean, reliable people that perhaps also can deal with a crisis in a calm way, process orientated, and also having a technical neck is, as I can see in the free industry, something really, really important. And before we get into the real structure of your program, you just mentioned self-esteem. Stephanie, I would like to dig into that one, because when I grew up, in the 70s, it was like that hot kind of job you wanted. You wanted to be either a pilot or you wanted to be a cabin crew, because you could fly around the world basically for little money and discover it. And I just remember looking up to these people as being really, those that made it. But it seems that self-esteem is a bit of an issue. Also, how the airline industry since the 70s, since I can remember, really developed itself.
Well, I think that's nicely described, as you put it. Of course, coming from the 70s, where few people could afford it, and where those who had the skills, they also had this that special status, and the special status is like an old mythos that travels on, and it's still there as a light aura today, but it's not really compensating for all the other costs that you have in that profession. So today, the salary is a fraction of what it used to be, inflation corrected, of course. And the lifestyle is also not all that great. You have seen that very quickly to travel the world, but the cost of having your family at home, the cost of being told every 25th of each month how your next month looks like, and you may have two joker days to choose. Well, this is my wedding anniversary and my first day of school of my child, and I hope I get these 2 days through, and I have no visibility of my life whatsoever beyond these 25 days. So this is a hard one. And then sometimes being away for a very long time, away from friends and family, and difficult to sustain the social relations. And on the question of the self-esteem, because the prices are declining and the margins are shrinking, the pilot is not, the king anymore, but is more of a commodity. Mm-hmm. So some pilots told me, I'm worth the rating of the plane that I fly, because a rating costs you between 30 and 100,000. So if an airline can employ you with this current rating, they can send you right on the job and have you productive in the workforce. If they have to take an additional 100,000 on you to train you, this is the cost you are to them. So they feel I am exchangeable, and all I hold is a certain rating to operate a certain plane. And if you cannot even translate that to a different plane, how should you ever be able to translate that into a different sector and into a different industry? Yeah. This is a bit of the background of what I experienced in discussions with colleagues.
Yeah, so, what I hear from what you're saying, there's two things. When these pilots come to the program that you initiated at the University of St. Gallen, they have two issues. An analysis of, what they can actually do, because they might not be able to tell you having a crushed, self-esteem level. And the other one is really to rebuild that self-esteem, because one thing for sure, the world out there, outside, let's say, the travel industry, is not easy. Retrained or not. So I wonder to what extent you do have to have a psychological support. They're going all the way through to say, hey, we have to even reestablish you first as a person before we even analyze you. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of that program you have established. Where did you start? I guess you mentioned analysis. I mentioned analysis. You first of all have to find out about the person.
Yes. And we do this quite extensively to really focus on the person. We follow the principles of executive education of today, which is just in time, just enough, and just for me. So what we want to give them is really something that's tailored to their situation, tailored to them as a person, and tailored to what they want to achieve. Not all of our pilots want to do 180% career shift and, go exit the airline industry. In fact, they're all passionate about their job. So whenever they get the next chance, good 80% of them, I expect, will be back in the cockpit. So you have to understand what is their goal. You have to understand their personality, and you have to deliver just in time, which means now, and not in 3 years, how you would usually develop programs, just enough. So something that is suitable for now to give them a license to operate in a different world. These were the ingredients around which we designed a program. So after analyzing the person, we analyzed where would actually be a good person job fit for them. So what can they do? They are, if you think about it, a pilot is a project manager already, or a manager. They operate a small SME with 300 clients in the back, with a team of 3 to 15 people, complex systems, so complex airline systems, communication systems at the same time, and so on. So they have quite some qualities to be a manager, a good project manager. So we identified where would be fit in the market based on who they are and their background and their skills, but also based on future professions.
And I think this is an interesting one you just mentioned, that most of them want to go back into flying. There I also dug out a very interesting survey by Flight Global and Goose Recruitment. And they asked these pilots, hey, about 43% of all of the pilots are only still flying. And will you go back? The ones that don't fly, will you go back to your job? And last year, so a year earlier, this survey was done, and this just came out, it was about 71%, and now it's 64%, because it's not the first time, Stephanie, that this sector goes through a downturn and perhaps a bit of a change in business model. And you were just saying about project manager. I think this is very interesting, because I wonder, do they come and absorb what you have to offer, or do they come and say, hey, that's the only other job that I could imagine apart from being a pilot? And you try to create this job personality fit.
I'm not sure if I 100% understand where your question is leading to, But we did ask them the question in the beginning and in the end, where do you see yourself? And what do you think is suitable for you? Yep. And it was actually quite diverse, I have to say, much more diverse than I expected. So some have a high affinity to technology. So some would say, well, I would even see myself learning a new skill, becoming a software developer, or using my system monitoring skill and my rigid process orientation and going into a future profession like cybercrime controlling. Some say, well, all day I'm managing risk, so I think I'm well suited for a risk management position. So I think at the end of the course, they have a lot of ideas where they can fit and how they can fit. And what we do, to your previous question, we do a lot. We do personality assessments, we do personal coaching, we do team coaching, we do skill workshops. So we center a lot around them and giving them hope, light, self-esteem, ideas of where this can lead them.
Yes, and I think that is so core that it actually, first of all, is about them. And if you need to kind of recreate a total new career, it is about you and whether you have the motivation, the strength to pull it through and also to continue, because any kind of sector may experience, of course, ups and downs. Now, when it comes to the program itself, tell us a little bit about the schedule and how you really structured it once the analysis is done.
Well, so first of all, we start with a kickoff. Even in our second class and cohort, we started with a briefing before the kickoff, because this is what pilots like. So we try to adapt. Mm-hmm. So we invite them for a briefing where they can ask all their questions, which pilots always have. Then we start with a kickoff session that compares aviation systems to management systems, pilots to managers, gives them an overview of the whole course, and explains them what it takes from them to be a student at the University of St. Gallen, what it takes from them to make them successful in this course and later on. And I also do part of the introduction session, and I use lots of analogies from the airline world. Even we call this whole program check-in to management. And
so they understand the lingo. So they're not like, okay, I can't even understand what she's saying. Exactly. I like that. Very tailored.
Exactly. And then the program basically is a fully online program, because we had very early on requests from Dubai and Canada and all different nations where people wanted to participate. And we thought, well, this is the time to be online anyhow during the COVID crisis. So we tailored it fully online, and you have quite an intense pre-read session where they get familiar with different concepts. We call this asynchronous learning. And we know that pilots are very good because they're used to preparation and they read very carefully and they take the tasks very careful or with a lot of responsibility. So we call this flipped classroom format, when in an asynchronous style, you can learn whenever you have the time. And you have a learning package before and some pre-reading. And then we give them a task, which we call preparation task, to make them think about, what does it actually mean for me? How would I apply that? What are my questions? And then we bring them together in class with a respective professor of the session. And then they can discuss, they can contextualize, what does it mean? They have breakout groups in the session where they also are introduced to skills. So the professor and the pre-read are responsible for the knowledge part, then the skill, of course, to train them new skills. And also we want to broaden their mindset. So these are the levels we thrive on. Then after the session, they get a transfer task where they really have to get in depth with the knowledge and apply it to a situation, solve a case study, and then they have a transfer session a few days later. And in addition, they have certain skill workshops, very practical, how do I write a CV for the business world? How do I present myself? How do I operate on LinkedIn and so on? And we have the personality coaching and the personal coaching sessions. So this is about how a course week looks like. And as you can see, it's quite comprehensive.
It's comprehensive, it's dense, and it really looks at all the aspects, not only in terms of the person, the personality, the skills they already have, but also the skills they don't have, and also about, self-reputation management and presentation. It's like dating, if you've not been dating for a long time and all of a sudden you're out there, you have to start dating, you need to know what sort of makeup to put on, et cetera, et cetera. So the entire teaching and coaching how to use social media such as LinkedIn to present yourself and really find a new career. We talked about the skills they already bring to the table. What are the main skills pilots are actually lacking that are needed in the outside airline world?
I think one of the big differences that we see in an airline pilot and in a great leader is that the airline pilot usually operates in an environment of 90% certainty. And he manages the certainty very well. And a leader operates in an environment of 90% uncertainty.
Yes, absolutely. And daily so.
and daily so. And when a pilot takes a decision, the next seconds, he has to prove if that was a right decision or not. If that in the end it was a hard landing or it was not a hard landing.
You mean if the plane goes down and crashes? Is that the kind of feedback loop? Oh my God, that's very macabre.
Yeah, or if
at the end of the day, this is what it is, right?
Yeah, or if you're violating air law or rules, you will be told immediately and a report will be filed. So in the management world, you often operate under conditions of high uncertainty, and you don't know how your actions to what they translate to. And pilots are absolutely not used to that you manage 90% of your time, the gray zone, and that the decision you took cannot be assessed till much, much later. And that responsibilities diffundate in the business world. Why in the pilot's situation, in the cockpit, you have one pilot in command, that's pilot flying, and he's responsible. So the systems are different, and the leadership approach. So I would say pilots are more managers of the complex system than leaders. Yeah. So I would say also the interpersonal skills is something that is not primarily relevant to be a good pilot, but it's very, very relevant when you go into higher management.
That's really interesting because there are two types of people, just to put it really, really simply. There are the risk averse type 1 people, they call them in psychology. And then the type 2 are the risk tolerant ones. Right now. And what you find is amongst the leaders, there are more the risk tolerant ones that can make decisions and know they have to make decisions, sometimes tough decision, even only on 60% of the information available or only on the information that is available. But, you need to make that decision. And that would have been my next question. So in tough times, economic tough times, we are always being told, be an entrepreneur, start your own shop. You know what you can do, be creative, crisis to creation, as we do have here on Mentory TV. Mm-hmm. But if you are a pilot potentially falling into type 1 category of risk-averse people, being an operator, an executor, rather than a creator, and somebody that is, looking to broaden the horizon, going out of the comfort zone, that's tough.
So I would also differentiate in the business world between managers and leaders. Mm-hmm. And I think leaders thrive on turbulences, uncertainties, and create this the spirit of resilience. Now,
whatever the odds, we'll make it. Just pull together.
Exactly, and the managers they manage the bottom line. What do we have to do to not go through our risk boundaries, to make sure we're stable, to make sure we manage the budget. And I think wherever managers are needed and legitimate, this is where pilots fit in well. The other point or the other scenario where pilots fit in well, and that's why I mentioned, for example, this the cybersecurity control. Whenever you have a disaster recovery plan or an emergency plan that needs to be executed rigidly, then a pilot is a great person. So I would say if we had more pilots acting and deciding for the current pandemic management, we would be better off, because we had pandemic scenario plans, and pilots would just very, very diligently operate on the abnormal checklist and then on the emergency checklist and decide within split seconds and take full responsibilities.
Yes, and exactly. And that is a little bit what you see also in the army, in this kind of crisis situation. They just then go and march ahead and do what needs to be done because they're trained to do so. And I think this is a fabulous skill to know, always kind of like debate and be creative, because there's sometimes not the time or the scope to debate, exactly, to be creative, but you just have to march on, check your list, make sure that everything is basically streamlined, risk managed, and responsibly so. So that's the pilots and the training program. And before we going into how the whole thing is really set up, financed and supported also potentially by the governments or institutions and scalable, let me quickly ask you about the cabin crew, because you have highly skilled pilots on one hand, and then you do have skilled cabin crew. And I wonder, they are nice and caring. I always feel so good, especially if they're nice sometimes. But anyway, because they seem to be stressed. But they give you the coffee, they give it to you with a smile. Where do they go? What is really the base they can build on in order to have maybe a more long-term career?
Yeah, you're hitting really a point there, because the cabin crew is even worse off. They are laid off much more easily. They are not so strict labor contracts as for the pilots. They're easier to train, so easier to replace. And even more of them, will have to look for a different career. And there you do have very passionate maîtres de cabine, and they also want to return like pilots. But you have a much more diverse field of cabin crew, where many, do it during their studies as a part-time job, as a life experience to travel the world for 2-3 years, and then they anyhow are on transition. So numbers that you were citing before, 70%, 65% wanting to return, we would expect much, much lower numbers for the cabin crew to return. So we have a more permanent workforce that is available for the market and that needs to be reskilled. And, Patricia, to be very honest, when I kicked off this program, I was filled with pride, to make something that is really that makes sense for the individual pilots, for their family, for the industry, for the business world, for the businesses that need the pilots. So I was very fulfilled. But the next morning waking up, I felt, but the first class is 30 pilots and we are laying off about 70,000. So we have to scale that. And that didn't leave me, that feeling of that's nice that I'm, it felt almost a bit like greenwashing. I have the responsibility towards these two worlds, so let's make something small that feels good. So I felt this urge of we need to scale it up. And of course, I was very aware we cannot do that alone as a university. We are an enabler. We give you knowledge and skills and we train you. But I felt we need to enlarge the ecosystem, invite other partners in it to make sure that we go the next step and that we not only reskill, but help them to enter the job market. And even more so for the cabin crew. So in the second time around, where we now do programs for cabin crew, and we have long debated if we do it together with the pilots, but we do it separately. We do it together, though, with the hospitality sector. So travel, hotel, gastro.
Leisure sector in general.
Leisure sector, exactly. So we train them together because, as you said, they have this attitude with a smile.
Yeah, they're nurturing, they're caring, right?
Exactly. So we were talking with the industry, seeing where would they find a new home. And very quickly, we found that there are many companies and industries that are interested in people who can do great customer care, who can even do sales jobs because they care about the other person, and they can give you a great experience and eventually even sell you something. So we had anchor partners that said, hey, I would be interested in people with this hospitality mindset. I would even pay, I would tell you, the University of St.Gallen, what I need, and I want that to be built in the program. But I would even pay for their education. And I take 70 of them, and I take 100 of them. So we are building up a program for the cabin crew plus tourism leisure sector for a couple of hundreds at once, starting very soon. And not only leaving them with the education, but also with a 50 to 60% chance to have a job afterwards.
Which is wonderful because you already have the side that is demanding and giving you exactly what they need, and then you can be a bit more targeted in your approach to retrain them or emphasize the skills in the cabin crews already. Let me just pick you up on one thing, Stephanie, you said, I had this wonderful feeling, I'm really doing good. You're making a difference. First of all, you're making an awesome difference. And every long journey starts with the first step. So, saying, hey, 70 pilots, and there is tens of thousands, 70,000 actually being really losing their job potentially indefinitely is, sure, gives you the feeling of it's not enough. But I think it is the step in the right direction, and you getting also governments involved makes it scalable, simply because the airline sector is a global sector. I mean, this is how we travel the globe, right? So it's kind of a no-brainer that everybody is in the same kind of boat. And I looked at the international data. I don't want to bore you with that, Stephanie, what actually the situation is with the pilots and how many were losing their job and how many actually intend to go back. So not that many intend to go back. So this kind of program that you initiated is very much needed, for example, in China. I looked at those numbers. Also, Russia not doing too well. So also America has their issues. So there is a lot of potential. Let's be a bit more concrete then in terms of the support from the government. How open, St. Gallen, how open is the local government or the national Swiss government? And how open are the ones you've spoken to across the borders?
It's a reflection of how well the countries are run, I would say. I would expect very high correlations when I see the results we have, both in talking to government institutions for subsidies or even collaborations, even PR collaborations to make this known, especially with labor unions. And also when we talk to the different airline CEOs, it's very interesting. So I would say the Swiss government is very open, very supportive, and so are the Swiss airlines. There is this sense of caring. So we are discussing concepts from, hey, well, that's a great idea. We communicate this to all our pilots and all our cabin crew, to we recommend it to do it, to we will pay them partly out of their outplacement package to get reskilled because we care. So this is what we see in Switzerland. Response rate usually a few hours. In Germany, we would say response rate a couple of days, saying this is interesting, but we currently don't have time. We have other things on our plate. And here is another person. I'll come back to you with a person. My people will call your people. We'll tell you.
Nice one. Mm-hmm.
Who in our organization takes care of that. But to not make such a dark picture, we are in touch with them as well. Germany is a bit slower. We also feel a bit more reputation oriented, saying, we don't tell our pilots, but we tell the press that we are participating, the media, that we are a good corporate citizen.
Yes.
And then America, of course, Britain is, busy with Brexit or so they were the worst experience. And US, the US is the US, that, hey, let's make it happen. Let's distribute that information to all airline CEOs and let's form an alliance and so on. So we see the spirit of the country and the government and the leadership very much reflected in how government and airlines react to collaboration ideas.
Yeah, well, no, this is very interesting. And at the end of the day, to help the labor force to get back into any kind of industry is of the government's interest, not least because of the tax money. And I have to say the airline industry itself is a huge contributor to taxes. So I guess in order to get that house back in order or retrain whatever is wrong on the other side is makes even economic sense, if not to say, emotional sense. All right. I mean, I think this gives us a very, very good insight of what you've initiated, Stephanie, which I think is awesome. This is why when you told me about it, I thought, no, this needs to be communicated to the world. And I hope that that will also help to just raise people's awareness that this is not a joke and something needs to be done and can be done by people like you with the support of the university, local governments, and the industry itself. Talking about pilots on one side, their skills, their lack of skills, and where they then can be used in the industry once they're trained up. More managers than entrepreneurs, more managers than leaders, I can hear. And also the cabin crew, one of the very vulnerable in this sector that are, on the other hand, very caring, very nurturing, able to make people feel good. And just, customer service is that makes, for me, a difference between one brand and the other. Is kind of like the after sale, I always call it, which leads to the new sale as well. So unless you have good stuff there, it's very difficult. Stephanie, any way we can support you from our side, please raise your hand, make it known. And I think it's awesome what you're doing. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you, Patricia. It was a pleasure.
And thank you, my dear Mentory TV community, for having joined us yet again for a fantastic conversation, this time with Stephanie Schoss. She is a director of the St. Gallen University, apart from an entrepreneur, one of the smartest women I have ever seen, capable. And she's a pilot as well, apart from, a super mommy, being there for a big family as well. So I hope you're going to join us for the next conversation as well. And till then, stay curious.